Hi, Marika. Hi, Jim. Can you hear me? Can you hear me well? Yes. We can still not hear you, but we will very soon. No? Maybe Jim, can you say something so we check if we can hear you? Because we couldn't really do it. Yeah, we still cannot hear you. Yeah, still not. We missed that joke. They're talking. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Now feel free to make all the jokes you want. We'll be.
Lieber nicht.
Thank you for joining. So.
See you.
Nice to see you. I guess we can start now. Everything ready? Guys, also? Okay. Whew. I'm not ready. Hamid, all good? Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Nice to have you here. Such a full auditorium. Hello, everyone online also. My name is Bruno Alves de Almeida. I am the curator of the Jan van Eyck, and I'm very happy to welcome you to the 7th edition of the Academy series, a project that we host collaboratively with the Hikes Academy in Amsterdam. And we have Jim van Giel here. Hi, Jim. In partnership also with UniArts, the University of Arts of Helsinki, and we have Marika Ordenius also joining us virtually, and supported by the Sestamonian Foundation also in Finland. So tonight we have the 7th edition of the series, titled Long-Hanging Fruits, Myths and Matter of the Oil Palm Complex, and it's a collective presentation by Elia Nurvista, Michel Lai, Sina Ribak, and Yoeri Guépin. So with this Academy series, we give it as a platform for our artists in residency to expand their work, but also show their work in process to a wider audience, both on site and online, specifically connecting to also the students of the UniArts in Helsinki. And before I give the word to Elia, that will make the rest of the presentations and kickstart this collective presentation, I'd like to remind everyone who's watching online, for you already know how this goes, but people online can participate via the chats in Zoom, YouTube, or Vimeo. Make sure you send the questions and comments, and I'll later on bring them to the conversation. And this is being recorded. It will be made available later on in our web platforms, where you can also watch the documentation of the previous editions of the Academy series. So thank you so much for being here. Be very welcome to the Jan van Eyck, and Elia, the word is yours.
Only me. Okay. So hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. And I'm really glad to have this opportunity to share about our interest together with my dear colleague, Sina, Yoeri, and Michel, in which some extent we have a trajectory over the palm oil. So, yeah, and also I'm happy that they all can come to Maastricht. Thanks for the Jan van Eyck Academy to having us. And yeah, I would a little bit give a briefly introduction about our event. So it's about the palm oil, the material that we found in many daily consumer products. It can be found from the potato chips, the ramens, the cosmetics, the nail polish, and so on. And I think it's, we found it seems like a half of more in our supermarket product. It's have a content of the palm oil. So to extend what Simrin Gill and Michael Tausig write in their book, Becoming Palm Oil, I would quote, they wrote about that we are all chemically palm oil now. It It is part of all of us, metabolized into our bodies, saturating in our skin, instilled in the tools and commodity we use, haunting the economy of which we are part. So to trace the palm oil from its origin and how it has become our everyday object is such a massive effort. True, it has been done by some scientific scientists and then maybe botanists or ethnographer and maybe many other disciplines. But we also believe that retelling the stories of palm oil can be done in many different format and shapes, also from our own experience. So in line with the complexity of the subject itself, which entangle in many issues such as ecology, labor, the access of colonial practice, land conflict, which is mostly happen in Indonesia and Malaysia, indigenous rights, and the consumer ethics, and many more. And it seems impossible to summarize many layers that define the global expansion of the oil palm complex for the past 2 centuries, including the resulting environment consequence for both human and more than humans. So, without intent to make this talk to be a campaign for not using palm oil, we want to invite all of us to rethink and unfold our experience of the palm oil and maybe to have some dialogues across discipline and language among us. And later, I think there would be a dinner also prepared by Sibyl, Ruby, and Philip that they also in line with the topics of the palm oil. So it will be a surprise for them, but I think it's worth to wait. And yeah, maybe I will hand this to my other colleague who can share a little bit about how we become a group. You want to share?
Yeah. So I'm Michelle. I had moved to the Netherlands to study in Eindhoven 2 years ago, and I had been very curious about the trajectory of the plantation legacy from the Netherlands, actually, which is why I started to look into the Dutch archives to understand how oil palm became to be such a huge and complicated issue and plant that's politically entrenched in so many different things in Southeast Asia. And I was curious to understand which creatives were involved and also kind of looking into these issues. So I started to Google and I found Yoeri pop up on Google. That's how I reached out to Yoeri, actually.
Not as the first.
Yoeri actually was the first, yeah. And then we started talking, and I also found out that Elia had moved to do a residency in Jan van Eyck, and she was also looking into similar issues. And I think that's how things started to come together when we started talking, and then Sina also came in, and through Zoom, through WhatsApp, through different mediums, we started to let our thoughts coalesce, start to unravel the dynamics in the relations with the oil palm as we started to piece together the pieces of information we found from the archives and from like oral traditions and stories that we had collected from different countries across different time spans as well. So we're happy to share a bit more of what we found today. We believe it's the beginning of more conversations to unpack and to come. So without further ado, maybe we could start with the first presentation. Yeah, that's me. So if the lights could dim a little bit.
I can maybe do. We decided to introduce each other.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Michelle Lai is an ecological practitioner looking at issues related to local agriculture and food systems in Singapore and Southeast Asia at large. She explores community-driven innovation and engagement practices, forming symbiotic relationships through everyday participation, research, and dialogue.
So I think the first presentation we wanted to do something a bit more simple, where we focus on literally the shadow stories that unravel on the fringes of the plantation. We have just a very simple installation here that plays with light and shadow. Given the history and the uses of the oil palm and the palm oil in history. So I would just read 2 excerpts of a play I had been writing that contains 2 stories in the rainforest itself. So is it dark enough? Yeah? Okay. Yep. We are ready.
Should I go?
Yay. Dear time travelers, imagine the living world we inhabit as ecological theater and let the evolutionary play. We live in the midst of toxic wastelands flowing down linear streams in the here and now. Where are you hiding? Di mana anda? Let's play a game of hide and seek. The tiger had been looking for the rooster in the jungles for days, but it was not to be found. On this particular day, it chanced upon the rooster by the river stream. Aha, rooster, said the tiger. At last, I've caught you. Now get ready to die. The rooster replied, fine, but can I ask for a favor? Why not, said the tiger. Before you kill me, could you promise me something? The rooster said, well, I don't see anything wrong with that. Speak. Tie this rope around the palm tree, the rooster said, and hold it high and taut, and let it go when I kick soil at it. To this, the tiger replied, why are you doing this? I am doing this because when I am dead, I want anybody who passes by this place to stop and say, 2 beings struggled here, and 1 met its match here. And so the rooster kicked soil all around. The tiger released the rope, and the palm nuts fell on the tiger and killed the tiger then, fulfilling the prophecy of the rooster. The second story is about the magical weaver ant, or the ant weaver, and the orangutan, or the forest being. The weaver ant was perched on a banyan tree, carefully stitching her leaves together. Her leaves held by the threads it spat out. On this day, the forest being was laying in the nest of the canopy, eyes closed, catching glimpses of the sun and receiving the sun's giving warmth. It opened its eyes, attentions turned towards the ant, who was weaving leaves a few layers below. Intrigued, the forest being swung its limbs branch to branch, lowering itself down the canopy to the ant. "And what will you make of these leaves?" said the forest being. To this the ant replied, "With every stitch, my sisters and I will begin to fold them in, to form a superhighway, winding and meandering through the trees in the jungles, through the nooks and crannies, creating pathways for our family to pass through the forest. For at the end of this super long highway, the tunnel, our queen sits and lays her eggs. The tunnel contains access to rooms where the eggs lie, nursed and cared for by our kin. But do not go near, forest being, for your feet will itch if you climb through these tunnels." Forest being, "I have to go soon. My sisters are calling me. Sampai jumpa. I'll see you soon." "Goodbye, ant. It was a pleasure to meet you. Sampai jumpa," said the forest being. As the forest being said goodbye, it actually stretched its limbs high up into the superhighway, and it screamed, "Ah, my arm is getting itchy. Now my other arm is getting itchy. My back is itchy too. My whole body itches. It's so itchy, itchy, itchy." And when others now chance upon the forest being, it sees the forest being covered in gold, with the itch that went with it wherever it swung towards. And that's the story of how the orangutan became gold or reddish orange brown. So that's the two stories. Thank you for holding up the light. And so maybe I could just introduce Sina before she starts the presentation. Sina Ribak is an independent researcher exploring the bioeconomy, land use, soil, biodiversity, and solidarity from a critical, more than human, nature-culture perspective. In her practice of co-embracing natures, she is looking for kinship from a diversity of fields to work towards social and ecological justice. behind.
But you need the tripod.
That was the idea, no? Sorry, but I can also try without. I have to share my screen first.
Yeah. Maybe here.
Yeah, hello everyone. While the moment of sharing happens, I can say I'm happy to be here. Hello. I can come close as well. Yeah, thanks for the stories, Michelle and everyone being here. Myself, over the last 2 or 3 years, also, yeah, I think.
I'm going to hold it for you.
Oh, yeah. Or I can do it. No. Yeah. Thanks. This is collective practice. So I think Elia, we kind of met around 2 years ago, mostly working online. You from Indonesia and myself from Germany, where we're doing research on bioeconomy. And I also came across the work of Simran Gill, who considers this question of place and history very personally, but also in collective experience. So, and I want to add that while she was born in 1959 in Singapore, she also has been growing up in Malaysia. And from this Malaysian context, she shares another quote that goes, "I found it surprisingly hard to figure out how to think about this plant. I've circled the question for months. The connections are deep and inextricable in many ways. How many of us are left who knew this landscape before there were plantations, or estates, as we call them? In my time, they've never been here." So this comes from the same publication, Becoming Palm. And I'm also struggling with this question of hers. And personally, I'm interested as a researcher for ecologies and the arts. I'm interested also in this question of landscape before there were plantations. So especially because I'm from Europe, so a region of very high consumption, I would like to pay more attention to those landscapes lost to this oil complex that we're here to talk about today. I'm from the northeastern lowlands of Germany, a landscape shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of kilometer-thick ice sheets. And since the glaciers retreated around 11,000 years ago, humans strongly altered the land for agriculture and settlement, digging drainage systems and parceling plots, creating barriers and enclosures. So when I was living in South America, this has changed my experience of a landscape. And in this picture from 2014, you can see my colleague Julio on the left and myself on the right in the community Rosario, which is only accessible by the river Mamoré in the tropical lowlands of Bolivia. And with Kiosco, the art platform I'm working with in Bolivia, we realized an artist residency on that river Mamoré, which is one of the affluents of the Amazon. And amidst lagoons and rivers, shores, plains and tropical forest, the community of Rosario lives within a landscape that is not only shaped by nature, but dominated by nature, I would say, which is the cycles of dry and rainy season and 7-year cycles of El Niño, La Niña that create then the largest flooded freshwater area of the world. So myself and the others as visitors from the different places in South America and the world, we were struck not only by the vastness and openness of the landscape, but the fact that the only infrastructure that was there were the rivers and the forests themselves. no roads, no fences, no signs of private property. So now to go together for a moment to the forest, which is the landscape that has been lost mostly to oil palm plantations. I brought you some sounds from the forest, also from Bolivia. From the Amboro National Park. And it's before we go, Amit, I say it starts with a story sung by Choto. He is one of the park rangers, and he's sharing this very short story about a large puma which came to the Amboro forest and down to the valley, and an old lady who saw that puma and she was trembling for fear during 10 days. But then, because she's old and wrinkled, the puma didn't eat her. That's in the beginning. And then going into the sounds, you can come along and let's see if we can find something with these sounds. Now,
Había un tigre de 4 metros que había bajado del Amboró. Era una vieja quien lo había visto. Hacen 10 días que tiemble miedo. Hacen 10 días que tiemble miedo. Y por arrugada no se la comió.
tropical forest in our minds. Or you can also just keep your eyes closed, as you prefer. And the place where we start from is the wooden cabin of the park ranger station. It's early morning and we start going down the slope along the path lined by the patuhu, the red, green, yellow flower, just as a Bolivian flag. And there are huge electric blue butterflies appearing like spirits from the dense forest and disappearing as quickly. They move around the patuhu and the surrounding plants and trees that stay immobile. I stopped to look more closely at those plants, and I'm remembered by its name. It's helianthus, from Greek helios, reminding me of then the sun's radiation that the plants use to photosynthesize. We can try to go closer and touch its leaves, feeling the detailed structure of the leaves. Each cell contains the chloroplasts, which the chlorophyll able to catch the sunlight, using light energy to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, creating the conditions to transform the carbon dioxide into oxygen and sugar. Here in the forest, I take another deep breath of this humid air, creating our planet's atmosphere, enabling all life as we know it. The silent plants don't look so immobile to me, knowing that feeding on light, self-fabricating glucose, the plants are the ones moving the sugar energy into every terrestrial sunlit ecosystem. The plants use the sugar themselves to grow their stems, flowers, fruits, and seeds, to grow and to reproduce. All animals, including ourselves, roaming the forest or the planet at large, are consumers dependent on the energy created by plants. But where are the animals? We hear them, but we don't see them. So Choto, the park ranger, tells us to go deeper into the forest and to find a fruit tree. Many forest-dwelling animals feed on the fruits to live. And when we go deeper in the forest, it's difficult to find the fruits because the canopy of the trees are so high. It's impossible to see if they carry fruits or not. But then there is a lower tree with odd-shaped branches on which the few fruits are directly stuck to the branches. They're not hanging from the tree, rather they look like artworks placed in the tree. These are the fruits of the cocoa tree. And we observe the tree from a distance, trying to look if animals come to eat the fruits, but because they are, the flesh around the cacao beans is very sweet, but we don't find the animals, and we can't wait any longer. Days are short, close to the equator, and we rather have to head home before darkness catches us. On the way back, on the sandy shore of the river, we see the fresh imprints of the puma, the local wildcat. It must have passed by while we were looking for the other forest dwellers around the cacao tree. And with this, we are back here. And there is an existence of the forests, and it is only existent because of all the existent organisms that are shown in this figure by Margulis, the biologist Lynn Margulis. And these are bacteria, protists, fungi, plants and animals, including us humans. So all depend on one another in evolution, in the formation and functioning of ecosystems. And I want to add that the story between especially plants and some bacteria is very special, because what we cannot see when we look at the plant's leaves is the very long-term and very close symbiosis enabling plants to have the virtue of photosynthesis. Because cyanobacteria, they have been formerly free living single-celled bacteria before at some point in evolution they become part of multicellular organisms such as plant cells. So this is a very close kind of relation, symbiotic relation. And I'm very fascinated that from there this relation, algae and later plant descendants emerged when these photosynthetic cyanobacteria began co-living inside these so-called eukaryotic cells. We are all eukaryotes, the animals, the plants, the fungi even. And through this becoming by living together, they are life as we know it, and we can see that symbiosis is not only common but very necessary for evolution. And knowing that, I think we understand again how the plants, and in that case the forests, are world makers, and forests being home to more than 80% of all terrestrial animal, plant and insect species. So these interdependencies, while they are mostly invisible to us, they are very, very important. And but what also happens is the loss of species. We know that since like the 1970s, around the same time when Lynn Margulis worked on her theories, we know that around half of the populations of animals that really depend on forests disappeared or were lost. And this does not even include the unknown species. So many ecosystem connections are lost, and one syndrome that the scientists even know of also since the 90s is called the empty forest syndrome. And this is something that is, even when we look at a forest that is there and it looks like having a beautiful canopy, actually we find that the forest is empty, lacking the forest dwellers. The animals are not existent anymore, especially larger mammals, especially those, for example, the primates who would eat the fruits of the trees and then disperse them while they go through the forests and plant and replant and rejuvenate the forest. So it's not only the animals that are lacking, but unfortunately particular kind of tree species that are in close relation with that exact animal species are not able to grow anymore, and forests get poorer in that sense, losing those tree-animal relations that have evolved over thousands of years. And with this disappearance, I would like to come back to the oil palm plantations and why sharing stories from the forests can be an invitation to rethink the boundaries of that plantations, and that we're going to learn much more of a bit later. So while the size and area of these plantations is devastating, the effects spread even beyond, because we have this complex interaction of climate change and degradation of land. So when human activities contribute to both through forest management and the change of forest cover, the type and quality of land is altered beyond the local scale of the plantation itself, but it goes. And it is kind of a vicious circle that is happening, because with more warming climate, the land gets more degraded in different regions, and with that, the forests that are degraded, the climate is more warming because it cannot cool anymore and do these what we call ecosystem functions. So I quickly would like to remind one of these narratives that is used by industry and even environmental NGOs, and also the so-called Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil, when they say that the oil of the oil palm is irreplaceable in ensuring, for example, global food security or achieving climate goals. This is a current narrative used. And it is true that the oil is so unique because it has the highest yield of vegetable oil crops if we compare it to sunflower or rapeseed oil. However, what makes it so invaluable or priceless are the ecological and social costs being externalized, making the product of the oil cheap. So the costs are very high, and we have to remind ourselves that the oil palm as a plant is not the problem, but the monoculture production system is. And there is this other quote from Simran Gill I could not hide from you. So while the oil palm is such a great plant in itself, the conditions of monocultures are so complex that injustice become hidden. And Simran Gill gives a very strong reflection of these narratives I just mentioned and their consequences in the quote. The entire quote goes, "The oil palm is the nation and we are its cradle. It's our mother and our father, our milk, our fried chicken, our beauty and our fuel. We consume the beast into being." Sometimes you can find yourself thinking it's not so much that the oil is there to satisfy our needs. Rather, we are here to give the palm a reason. So I think you already followed me that I would like to say that what is irreplaceable are the forests as life enablers and as the richest places of terrestrial diversity and the only habitat of many cultures. And we are closely related to forests, and forests are closely related to life itself. And with that, I continue saying that the plantation does not stop in its boundaries, and that the simplification of landscapes and ecosystems takes away the basis of our own survival. And in that sense, forests are also knowledge, and forests are relations. And if we can build relations together, for me that means also the sharing and building of knowledges, and also the different perspectives of forests that are in the world and the different cultures. For example, when Pedro Neves Marques, the artist and filmmaker, writes in his texts Mimetic Traps, Forests, Images, Worlds, he also describes that there is not the one forest and there's not the single image of it. And I quote, "Not only because the image of the forest disagrees with ours, but especially because the forest might be better understood as a multiplicity of images or a kind of crystal with many sides, angles, and perspectives looking at each other." So there's very recently this intergovernmental panel on climate change that identified indigenous knowledge and practices as important so-called contributions to climate resilience, and recognize now the role of indigenous people as stewards of the forests. And this is a very little start, I think, of a change of paradigm that includes different value and knowledge systems, and that perceive mutual collaborations, entanglements, and care that are very important to conserve our global forests, the climate, culture, biodiversity, and ultimately ourselves. And yeah, I think we can learn from the land and also give back. And I would like to thank especially Hernan Cedula and Raquel Schwartz for trusting me, for being able to share their images in this presentation. And with that, I say thank you. And I will give the microphone to the person who reads Yoeri's. No. I read yours. Yeah, sorry. That's okay, right? Thank you, Elia. I can introduce you. So Elia Nurvista from Indonesia is an artist exploring a wide range of art mediums with an interdisciplinary approach. And she focuses on the discourse on food. Through food, she intends to scrutinize power, social and economic inequality in this world. She is participating in Jan van Eyck's Academy residency program 2021-2022.
Yeah, thank you, Sina. So yeah, I will hand over the short presentation. So yeah, maybe I will start with a little bit telling about my curiosity about the palm oil and the plantation. It was start when I have a chance, an opportunity to meet and to encounter and have a conversation and learning from some of the people. It's the artists, the activists, and then the indigenous community in Indonesia, which mostly they are struggling with the palm oil plantation that have happened very massive. And then also later I know that Indonesia and Malaysia itself is the 80% supporter of the palm oil needs for the global consumption. And then maybe I also already come across with the palm oil because I'm interested how they become kind of commodities in the food products, but I never know how it's impacted directly with some people that I meet. So yeah, that's then this curiosity. It's I bring it to this program in Jan van Eyck. Then, like Michelle said before, then I met Yoeri, and we decided, four of us, to learning and doing the research about this. So to start my curiosity, I would share some of the image that I collect from my many sources. It's also from the artists that I was working with before, and also from the indigenous or like a people community in Indonesia that I've been working with, and some of the image also from my own, and also most of the rest from internet and from the book. So Hamid, can you please do? So it's quite long, 6 minutes. I hope you are not get bored. At least it's better rather than just listen to me. You have an image. Produce in Liverpool, and we have this also if you are interested to see. Yes, from the liver family. Yes, the brother. Yes, this is one. I share my screen. So from 2020 to 2021, I had the opportunity to work with the artists and the community to working in the about the issues of palm oil in also it contained in many different formats such as exhibitions, forum and symposium, and also the attempt to build the solidarity network. And I will share some of the photo artwork from one of the artists that I've been working with. So it's the name of the journalist is Fembri Waluyas that have long-term working to archiving the massive of palm oil plantation in Papua specifically. And also during that time I'm in touch and learning a lot from the other communities such as Talang Mama in Sumatra, and also another it's called Pasar indigenous community in Kalimantan. So what I want to share is like this because as an Indonesia, it's Indonesian citizens, I mean people from Indonesia, which is the country is exported very massive of palm oil, but this is something that not so common that people know how its plantation look like, how the material itself look like, and how the process from the fruits into the crude oil into the our products, daily product. So I think this is for me that it's not haunted, but I'm curious about the complexity of the palm oil itself. So yeah, this is his work about mostly it's indigenous land conflict. So most of the community that I encounter are struggling with the issue of the land conflict, the farmer and labor, and then also the economic and social transformation, because also in the industry and the plantation itself, it's is a huge economic giving impact the economic in the people in Indonesia. So yeah. Some of the picture already there. So I have encountered with some of conversations, and then that I learned that some of them are fight through the legal case to the court about the land, but some of them fight with their own members of community who have desire to use their communal land to use to plant this cash crop because it's very benefit for them. And then some of them fight for justice and better economic as plantation worker. Some of them happy how the economic growth from the palm help their family to send their kids to the university, for example. And then some of them try to get advantage of the situation from becoming a smallholder or the agency to supply the labor. So yeah, this is also. What I learned from them is how complex and cannot be simplified as a black and white who are the one that exploiting and who are the one that being exploited, and also it's involve individuals, community, governments, NGOs, and also corporate. They are entangled each other with all their own interests, and this is just the first stage of how the palm oil being the production is not even how it's the distribution and then the consumption. So I realized that the situation is much more layered than just how bad the story of the plantation are affecting the economy, the environment, the labor, the farmers, and the indigenous people, the orang utan. That there is a lot of massive issues I think in Europe that they are concerned with orang utan, which is, I mean, it's also good, and somehow the solution is to enlighten the consumers. So I feel that even though this narration, the narrative of how to enlighten the consumers is very useful to share the awareness of the how the palm oil being produced, and also to raise the funds to mobilize the boycotts or to do the political campaigns. But this approach, somehow it feels like a charity based on the long-standing colonial and white supremacy idea. And also, when I learning about this, I mean, there is a lot of a symposium, or it's coming mostly from the academic or activist side. That and then then we realize that this model has been used and co-opted and subverted by the corporate and the government and the NGO to twist their agenda, exploring on liberal environment and human rights discourse to further extraction and profit from themselves. So, but also I understand that not so many of us has a privilege to to choose the products that not contained with the palm oil, because usually it's more expensive, and it's almost impossible to avoid the palm oil as a consumer or people that are involved in the chain of the palm oil product. So I want to quote what Max Haven wrote in this book, The Palm Oil, the Grease of Empire. So he said, today, hundreds of millions of people cooperate in the palm oil economy as a growers or consumer, as a migrant worker or corporate executive, as any one of case of different characters whose hand have touched the product on its path from seeding to finish the product. So, wow. To end my presentation today, it is still going, and I think it's really premature that I call it my research. And then also I still thinking to articulate how this research going on. But maybe what I can say, like maybe we can think together about what does it means for us to be part of the world which is made from palm oil, the material that we consume every day and almost impossible to avoid to be part of our bodies. But at the same time, we acknowledge and understand how this material is extractively born and being produced. And I think, like we mentioned before, that I mentioned before that maybe some of us didn't know how the palm oil itself as a material, and then also the history. And our colleague Yoeri will be explain more about that. So after this, he will do his presentation, and before I will read the bio of him. So Yoeri Guépin from Netherlands is an artist, researcher, and gardener. Past project involved working with archive and collective in botanical garden, museums, and scientific institutes. His latest project focused on the loss of biological and cultural diversity as a result of industrial agriculture, and the city as a potential habitat for endangered plant species.
Hello, everyone. I have been looking at mostly botanical gardens from, I would say, like 2014 to 2017. And I made several works about that. And at some point, I started looking at the botanical garden in Delft that doesn't exist anymore. And it was because it was a technical botanical garden. And looking in the archive, I found immediately a link to Bogor, Indonesia. And I got very interested in the history of the kind of colonial botany and what were the preconditions for this gigantic industry that is now the plantation industry. In 2020, I was supposed to go to Bogor to work with their archive, which is partly Dutch, and it's also Japanese and Indonesian. But yeah, 11 days before I was supposed to go to Bogor, the pandemic hit us, and we were all locked inside. And in the meantime, I've been working on other projects, and then I got this invitation from Elia to go back to my notes, and which is what I did. So it's also really nice to kind of see that material going somewhere. I also brought some well, I call them objects. You can go and get them around. You can hold them. Everyone take one. So these are the seeds of the African oil palm, indigenous to the semi-wild groves of the tropical and subtropical West Africa, with a habitat spanning from Senegal all the way to Angola. The seeds are very difficult to propagate. I have been working on this for the last 2 months, and there are seeds in the boiler room. So far, in I would say 60 days, nothing happened. So it's it's a challenge. As I said, the seeds are very difficult to propagate. The average germination rate is around 20%. The seeds require a moist surrounding and a constant temperature between 25 and 35 degrees. It can take up to 90 days before they will germinate. The seeds you are having have been bought by a company registered in Texas with branches in Ghana, selling mostly heirloom seeds to smallholders and allotment gardeners. Other seed sellers I contacted demanded a minimum order of 3,000 seeds. I have been interested in seeds and plants for my whole life. And also with the land. I consider myself a peasant. I grew up on an organic farm. Both my grandparents and my parents have been organic farmers. And I could say safely that I'm good with plants and seeds. So this one is kind of another challenge. One thing that has been puzzling for me is that these seeds that you are holding are alive. They are living creatures, always sensing out, waiting for communication and signals in the form of water, temperature, and in some cases also light. The seeds I have here are seeds from the Dura variety. And the seeds you are having are the Tenera. These are heirloom seeds, or these are actually wild seeds. These are wild ancestors of all the plantation palms. And the ones you are having are the ones that are being grown on the plantations. The seeds, these ones, they are giving seeds every fruit. So basically you can plant these and it will regrow and give the same species year after year. The seeds you are holding, they don't. You can never reproduce a hybrid because it makes genetic combinations that are random. It takes actually 10 years to stabilize that. And a palm oil only produces fruits after 5 years. So that costs you 50 years to make hybrid seed stable. And so I dove a bit in the seeds. African oil palms are cross-pollinating. They are producing male staminate and female pistillate flowers that pollinate naturally through wind and insects. Seeds have an average memory of 7 years. They store 7 years of climatological data within their DNA structure, so they are able to respond and adapt to climatological changes and diseases. Genetic variations and climatological circumstances can also influence the sex of the palm, oil palm. I quote unquote, all the sexual references are not mine, they're Linnaeus, and I usually don't use them. But for the sake of the clarity of the reproductive organs, I'll use them. Other variations in oil palm inflorescence are a combination of male, female, and bisexual flowers. Flowers that have both stamina and pistillate, same as a vanilla orchid or a tomato, for example. These plants are collectively classified as polyagamy. Linnaeus, eat your heart out. When I looked for places in Europe that sell African oil palm seeds, I found only one nursery laboratory in Montpellier, France, that apparently there are only a handful breeding companies worldwide. Let's say there are 10 that provide all the plantations with seeds. So it's not only a monocrop, but it's also a very limited availability, and it's definitely not a participatory practice. These plant laboratories modify, select, and patent their hybrid seeds. The breeding laboratory in Montpellier advertises with varieties with names such as super machos. Super machos are genetically modified palms that produce plants with a very masculine sex ratio. This is from their website. The company collaborates with farmers in Sierra Leone that grows their genetic material for the labs, and they use GPS systems to locate the exact plants. All oil plantations worldwide use hybrid seeds, and they cost around $1 per seed. The system of monocropping hybrid plants is extremely dangerous. One infestation can destroy entire populations, and hybrid seeds need to be crossed with wild ancestors, these ones, from West Africa to maintain a broad genetic package. We had a meeting with one of the scientists from Wageningen, and he assured us that it's only a matter of time before such an infestation will happen, and yeah, no one knows how and how to prevent this. The palm itself is very old, and I don't use the scientific name Eleus guineasis, but there are many names, mostly from West Africa, where it has seen as the queen of the plant kingdom. If we follow the Linnaean taxonomy, there are two types of African oil palms growing in the wild: the African oil palm and the American oil palm, called Oliveira, and that grows mainly in Brazil. It is believed that they were brought to Brazil from West Africa by slave traders in the 17th century, and although it produces very little fruits, probably to the change in climate, it has been adapted to the local ecology and could be considered native to Brazil. Also, when a species is native, that's a question, depends on who you ask. And I also think it's again like putting these very human-orientated concepts on plants makes no sense. The African oil palm is the highest yielding species in the entire plant kingdom. So not only in the oil, but there's no plant in the world that produces these amounts of fruits as the oil palm. It has been of great importance for indigenous communities along the African west coast and used in traditional medicinal practices, rituals, and key elements in various dishes. The oldest record of the use of African oil palm dates back 5,000 years, and one can imagine what a sophisticated knowledge the indigenous communities in West Africa have of the plant, its habitat, cycles of growth, and different uses. All parts of the African oil palm can be consumed and have applications. Its roots, for example, are used for tinctures, tea, and medicinal powders. Juice of the leaf provides a rich resource of vitamin C. Young shoots can be eaten. Its bark mixed with ginger burned to repel insects. Juice tapped from the stem, fresh or fermented as palm wine, and the larvae from the palm weevil are used as a source of protein. My first encounter with eating unrefined African palm oil was in Senegal, where it was used in a stew with peanuts, tomato, peppers, and chicken named mafé. The fruits of the African oil palm grow in large clusters. Can I swap to my PDF? Yeah? I think it's nice to show the... I switched, but the screen hasn't. Yeah, it's oh, okay. Yeah. I had it on pause, but maybe it had a life on its own. Yeah, oh, sorry, it's also in Dutch. The fruits of the African oil palm grow in large clusters and provide two types of oil. The orange-yellow mahogany-colored flesh, which we see here. This is a paste made of it. Yeah, you can taste. It's actually very nice. It's creamy, nutty, and this is also the healthy part. There's also a less healthy part. They provide two types of oil. The orange-yellow mahogany-colored flesh surrounding the seed and the white fat inside the seed that needs to be crushed to be obtained. The flesh containing the red oil, called crude oil, is high in unsaturated fat, and the kernel, used by the petrochemical industry, has saturated fat, widely used for cosmetics, stabling agent in all the foods, and biofuel. Derivatives of the kernel in the form of palmic acid have also been used by the US Army to produce the devastating napalm bombs. Yeah, it works. When the first Dutch colonial botanist brought the African oil palm from the botanical garden in Réunion to the botanical garden in Indonesia, which you can see on the image, the botanist had no clue how the pollination worked, because they forgot to bring its natural pollinator, the African palm weevil. For 50 years, the African oil palms have been without fruits in the botanical garden in Indonesia and served solely for ornamental purposes. The oldest record of the African oil palm in Southeast Asia dates back to 1848 in Slans Plantentuin in Buitenzorg, which is, the image is taken here. The botanical garden is now called Kebun Raya Botanical Garden in Bogor. I'm just looking if I pronounce that right. So this is the African palm weevil. At the beginning, the botanical garden is established at 1817, and at the beginning of the 20th century, things started to change under the leadership of director and microbiologist Melchior Treub. This was also my entrance in that history, because I found his PhD from 1874, in which the microbiologist tried to grow lichen formations. And these are the drawings actually made in a lab. And why this is important? Because Treub used his PhD on lichen symbiosis from that time as the blueprint for his concept of colonial symbiosis, an economic system where all parties involved get a share of profit. Of course, that's the promise. Labs and test stations were built near plantations. Labs and test stations were built near plantations. Where am I? Yeah. Connecting microbiology with agriculture and the botanical garden as a vessel where scientific knowledge was organized. His state-funded science transformed the botanical garden into an empire-building agronomical cash machine, clearing the road for the plantation system of the 20th century. So here is an image of the botanical garden in the 19th century, and when Treub became the director, it looks almost landing on Schiphol and looking at the Dutch landscape. The botanical garden expanded enormously, and all the plots that you see are test fields, fields where hybrids are made, where species are crossed, and where research is done. So the garden became a farm, you could say, or became like the the industrial equivalent of a garden. The Dutch colonizers saw how the, I'll just show some images from the, so these are the test stations. They were built through the whole landscape of Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, this is the rubber test station. The previous one was the sugar test station. And you can also see at the architecture that there is a kind of there's an empire building. Like, these are not labs, they are actually tools, they're power tools. And from the inside they look like this. So you would expect it's a government building, but it's actually a laboratory. So these are the pictures I found in the archive. The Dutch colonizers saw how the British had successfully set up palm oil plantations in the Congo, where plantation managers dealt with the pollination the same way they built their plantations, and harvested palm fruit with cheap labor and slash and burn ecocide land clearings. Workers bound to coercive, quote-unquote, coolie contracts carried out reproductive work, gathering pollen and dusting it onto the female flowers, resulting in enormous fruit sets. I have a film which is made in the 1920s, and the film documents the what happened? One too far. The film documents the process of the first palm oil plantations in Indonesia. Mullens was commissioned by the Dutch government, and this film was largely made to attract investors in the palm oil industry. There's no sound, so I will just talk over it. This film, made by Willy Mullens, shows this process. And actually, it is still done the same way. These are the propagating beds. So here we see where the seeds are planted in small batches. Call it a nursery. So it's a miniature version of the plantation in becoming. And I also have to say the logo of the eye, I have it from the eye archive. It cost me a few €1,000 to get that away, so I hope you can look through it. Yeah, or an eye. So this is after around a year and a half, 2 years, that they have the size of, let's say, a human. Here you see the rainforest being cleared. Yeah, it takes 5 years to bear fruit and to become an adult. So this film is also made over a period of several years. Yeah. So here we see the workers. And of course, this was promoted in the Netherlands as a development strategy, because in order to make a plantation, you first need to make a road. And the more roads, the more development. And here we also see how the forest has been cleared, and the Dutch colonizers in their white suits in the car. It's all very standard. There's still a few and there's a little bit further, there's a very nice moment where you see the hand pollination, because hand pollination was all hand labor, so you needed an enormous labor force to run a plantation. thousands, I think. Yeah, yeah. You see a truss. No, you can give it a whack. Uh, yeah. Yeah, wind is another, but it's not a full pollination, so you get very little fruit. These are the flowers. So these are the pollen. So this is actually how you pollinate. And you only get this full truss if you fully have a cross-pollination. I will continue. During the Second World War and with the independence of Indonesia, the palm oil plantations were left. The palms grew too high for hand pollination, and workers refused to work on plantations set up by its former oppressor. This changes drastically around the 1970s, when Unilever bought the natural pollinator, the African palm weevil, to the plantations in Malaysia. The introduction of the weevil was an enormous success. The weevil slashed pollination costs to zero, and the harvests were even bigger. After the introduction in Malaysia, this multi-billion-dollar weevil was immediately spread to Borneo, Sumatra, and beyond. It was a living technology that ignored property boundaries and managerial designs in its hunger for oil palm flowers. The weevil did the same labor for smallholders what it did for plantations, dramatically boosting the yields and setting the stage for a massive increase in oil palm plantings after the 1990s. Some plantations now breed the weevil and spray them with pollen before releasing them in the plantations, bringing the pollination back under human control. So I thought it was very interesting that this kind of animal is actually the birth of this expansion of the palm oil plantations, which which was otherwise not possible. So this is a little bit of a historical overview. This was also my presentation. I'll go back to the weevil. Yeah.
The weevil, okay.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
You can share this one. And,
Do you want to keep over there?
okay, let's go. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much for sharing the research and process with us and unpacking this complexity of this oil palm complex. So, Q&A time. Any questions from here or online, just write them on the chat. And if you want to speak to this microphone, let me know and I'll bring it to you. So many questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think I'm not on the camera, but I don't have to be in the camera. Can we share this?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is one of the first soaps?
This is the 207 soap.
Wow.
But that doesn't look like a Unilever soap. No?
It doesn't.
No, it looks like an unrefined soap.
No,
because
because everything was brown soap before, huh?
Yeah. The modern hygienization. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so many questions. So the weevil, you call it? The weevil?
Yes, the African palm weevil.
What did that do to the ecosystem?
It
You know?
It also destroyed
Exactly.
the palm oil, and surprisingly, it didn't do much to the ecosystem because transferring insects is actually not a practice that you can do because you never know what kind of impact it has on an ecosystem. But this was a very surprising success where the palm weevil actually stick to the palm itself because it needed the palm to survive. And it also eats the palm, so it slowly eats up the tree as well, and so it's a kind of double
Yeah.
But yeah, very necessary. And nowadays the new cultivars, so this one grows very high if you grow it, and the ones you have, they also grow them with lower stems,
Yeah.
so it's easier harvest. And so the cultivar, the tenera you have, they are very different from these ones. They're actually cultural objects, I would say.
Yeah,
They have been modified by scientists, and same as the milk cow in the Netherlands. That's not something that nature would ever make or never survive even. So that's the same for this.
Yeah. And the palm oil industry started in Congo, or started in Africa first, and then with Lever.
Yeah, with the Lever brothers and the Boter-Unie, and they merged.
Exactly. And then it went to Indonesia. But now Indonesia is the largest producer? With Malaysia.
Now actually Indonesia and Malaysia are the biggest investors in new plantations in West Africa.
Yeah, exactly.
Mainly in the Congo. So it's all together. And also the genetic material from the American oil palm is very important because it has other traits that scientists in these labs can use to breed into the new varieties. So it's all together. It's a very global.
And how do you, because this is, your collective is sort of a research as well, right? You're sort of starting as a collective now, or no? But it seems like you could do well together. Unilever, Procter & Gamble, there's a couple of food companies in the world, right? And they own many brands. Basically, they almost own all the brands. Do you think that there's a relationship between the fact that palm oil is in all of those products and the fact that they could become sort of the owner of all those products? Maybe to Sina, yeah.
I can start because you're speaking about what we now have somehow as this moment where this oil palm supply chain seems so fixed, and we have this demand for the oil for products that obviously we don't need, but we have been made needing them, and only through the ingredient of the palm oil itself, you think they could create those brands? So that's a question.
That's a question, yeah. Whether it's something that has been researched. Yeah.
Yes. Well, in that, I think it is very much one of the ingredients, but then there must be others, and I'm not an economist, but the fact that the very few also, as you explained, control not only from the seed but over the corporations, over the mills, etc., each and the refineries, that each part of this so-called supply chain is also very controlled, and it's very specialized, and even today the stock market is very specialized. There's very few people who are knowing how the stock market of the oil palm price will react or not. And if you have, I think this control, you can also build these brands. You want to add to that?
I think maybe I'll just add a bit more on the futures finance side. I think it's interesting growing up in Singapore because I see how the money flows through Singapore, in that the financial market for like palm oil commodities and futures are headquartered in Singapore. So, and I think Singapore, a lot of the big companies that own the plantations are headquartered in Singapore as well. So actually all these countries tend to profit when they work not just with Unilever, but when they are so close to the plantations, they're able to integrate processes horizontally and vertically as well. And of course, cross continents to Europe, where Unilever has its bases as well. Just to kind of answer your question in a generally speaking.
Yeah, it would be really nice to also tap into sort of the economical aspects. And
Rotterdam is one of the biggest importers in the world.
Yeah.
It's actually Singapore and Rotterdam that are they are manufacturing. So they make all the refinery processes are actually done in the
in the harbors. So
yes, exactly.
Like oil in general.
100 years ago, Amsterdam was the capital of oil palm, actually, of the world. So then all these processes were done in Amsterdam. So it's also this kind of extraction of a cheap product and then refined and then kind of sold back to the world. So, and I think that is still, Unilever is still doing that. And of course they try to now greenwash themselves, but the history speaks otherwise.
Exactly. Well, I'm asking because within finance, you learn about diversification of products, right? And I always thought that diversification was about need. So we need another product, so we make another product. But it might also be the other way around, about the accessibility of palm oil or accessibility of products, which taps into the last question I'm going to ask, because then I'm going to give it to someone else. Because what I loved about your presentation is that also, Sina, you talked about sugar as well. And you talked about, in fact, photosynthesis and how plants photosynthesize oxygen or use oxygen in order to translate CO2 into sugar. If you look at food in general, one could say that it mostly consists of sugar, fat, and protein, right? How is the relationship between, let's say, that knowledge, sugar, fat, and protein in relation to ecological crisis? So could we translate? You see what I mean? Like, because palm oil is huge, right? So but it's a fat. You have many types of fats, but this is the fat that makes sort of two things. It can extend, it's cheap, it's whatever, but the same for sugar, right? And then it also has its colonial aspects. So that's maybe you can, I don't know who would like to, because maybe it's nice for the research as well, right?
About sugar, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting. All those questions relate to, I guess, different stages to our different ongoing works around, sugar and seeds. Because when you were introducing your question, I would first say that this so-called diversification of products is totally fake, because they all contain the same, as you just explained, but they have a very nice branding and they look different, but they are actually plainly the same. So this diversification would be if instead of the 5 or 6 monocrops that we have in the world, which is corn, wheat, soya, and I guess then we have the palm. What else am I missing? This would be a real diversification, and that's on a reaction more on your first part of the question. And the second, how I try to understand it, I mean, it's interesting because it goes back when I studied ecology as well, and I had this very fantastic term in London with these professors. They made us measure the capacity of photosynthesis of a particular plant. So this was a kind of lab activity, and now going back to these issues, like, I don't know, 20 years later, I was thinking of, wow, did I really ever understand the process of photosynthesis? I don't think so. And the more I read now about it, I find researchers who also say we can just describe the processes in a depth that we as humans can understand it, but not further. But how I understand it now is ultimately it makes the sugar, and that is the energy that goes through all the ecosystems, and from that again we from the different capacities of the plants, we have sometimes also proteins and oils, etc. But first comes the sugar. and what it means to knowledge. I think this is when we do the sharing and talking about it, that we can create new ones. But yeah, you want to go?
I can maybe add as a from a farming perspective, is that like the industry always misunderstood the plant life. They simplified it. They say it's potassium, natrium, but it's more than that. There are so many more elements that's been used for different properties in a plant, and also for nutrition for your own body. If you eat that plant, it contains different nutrition. So I would say this kind of simplification is still leading, and that is very interesting. It was invented in 1870 by Justus von Effen, I think German scientist. And he even said, like 10 years later, oh, this was a misunderstanding, but it was never corrected in history. And still the economy, or let's say the agronomical economy, is still based upon that. The other hand, you could also say we should have as much as possible from our agriculture, because it means we can save other places. We don't have to expand fields further. We can actually maximize and make it as industrial as possible what we have, in order to not expand more farmland, so we can save biodiversity. So that's another way of looking at it. So
in that sense, you would use simplification in order to
to extract as much as possible.
save land.
Yeah.
That's in fact what's happening. But exactly, because what's happening is that this diversification only seems as a diversification, right? So you walk into the supermarket, you see all these thousands of products, but in fact you could delineate them back to 6 products, or even 3.
Yeah.
So it's an imaginary product, right? We're talking about images. We're eating images, right? That's basically what we do. And the rest is just protein and fat and sugar. And palm oil. That's fat. Okay, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to give it to someone else. Yeah.
Hello, I've met some of you already. I'm Wim. I'm the new writer in residence, for the Flemish writer in residence. Hi. I wanted to first share something. I have a background in anthropology, and I have a friend who's also an anthropologist. She's now, I think, at Cambridge, Viola Schreer. And she's been doing research in Indonesia and Borneo for like a decade, like on rattan, on artisanal gold mining, on forest fires, which is often related to palm oil and the whole controversies around that. And her latest project is on orang-utans. And the interesting part is she did field work in these highland or villages in the highlands of Borneo. And the interesting thing was that when she interviewed people about the orang-utan, people would often say, we've never seen this kind of animal, or never even heard of it. And at the same time, there were like NGOs coming to this area to bring out orang-utans from captivation. They would arrive like with a hugely expensive helicopter and Range Rovers and stuff like that in this area where there are no basic necessities often. So why I'm giving this example is that there's often, like you said, there's often very contrasting views on an issue like palm oil. My friend also said, in some villages, people are sometimes waiting for palm oil to arrive because palm oil brings rami, it brings modernity and business and crowds and jobs and stuff like that. And Elia, you mentioned a bit these different perspectives that exist, the indigenous perspective and the complexity around it. And I was wondering whether you could elaborate on that, because I think, for like the national government, palm oil is like their national treasure, so they have very contrasting view about that. That's my first question. And my other question is, I read recently that Indonesia has banned the export of palm oil. Could you also elaborate a bit on that?
Representative of Indonesia. Yes, thank you, Wim, for your sharing your thoughts and also the question. The question. So yes, I've been like, for example, there is a one. In Kalimantan, we call it Kalimantan, but people internationally call it Borneo, the island. There is a one of the they themselves acknowledge themselves as an indigenous community, so it's called it Rangan community. And I was talking with one of the a female leader of, she's working with the legal case of the indigenous land to claim as an indigenous land, because in Indonesia itself the agriculture, the land reform, the land ownership, also there is lots of, let's say, problematic. It's also coming from the colonial, Dutch colonial heritage. And then how they say that indigenous has a right to having land, but on top of it, it's always the government need, the government, how you say it, for their own priority needs. So, yes, let's say like all the land, it's owning by like the state, but also you can have it like and the privates and also the indigenous and so on. So what they fight is how the government giving the permission for the concession for the corporate, but also this group is claimed that it is their own land, land. But then also she said this is another fight, but also how she has to fighting with their own member that they want to, because they also feels like I'm part of this community, and then also I have a right to how I want to use this land, and then they wants to plant the palm oil, because this is really easy to get the money, and this is the real money, because all like the corporate who's established in many, like in Papua, in Kalimantan and Sumatra, they have like give a promise everyone who will voluntarily plant the palm oil, they will buy any harvest, and then they will, so this is something that promising from them. And this is one of the complexity. And of course, some of people in the, like I was, this is also very NGO way of thinking about the ecology of the orangutan. Like I feel like no one really, they care about orangutan, but this is not something that they prioritize while they're thinking how to send the kids to the university, which is goes to Java, the central of the good education in Indonesia. So, yeah, and then the second about the ban of the palm oil, that I know from some of my colleagues that working like in academical background, is like in 2030, the European thinking to ban the palm oil production from Indonesia and Malaysia, but then all the corporates, the stakeholder, and then they are really think how arrogant European market, and then it's something like they think it will be collapse their economy. So this is also there is a lot of pro and contra about this, and then now they're thinking to build the sustainable and plantation, which is involved like voluntarily people. There is no land grabbing, there is no violence on it, but it's still a lot of question mark how it's happened. Yeah, maybe that's what I can tell you.
Maybe just to the ban, I don't know, because there have been several bans also in the recent years from countries that are not important or not importing palm oil anymore. And these are very political questions, as Elia just explained before. The European Union was subsidizing palm oil a lot to be used as so-called biofuels. So a percentage of palm oil was mixed into other fuels, making it more climate friendly, while tropical forests burn and pet land is emitting much more carbon. So once this sinked in, there has been changes in the European regulations, and these subsidies stopped. But what now has been announced in 2019 already was that the European Union will phase out any use of this palm oil in biofuels, etc., which are huge markets. And well, as far as I read as well, with the situation of war in Ukraine and so-called shortages of any vegetable oil, this was a reaction as well from Indonesia too. I don't know if it's hopping on some excuse and saying, no, we need the oil for our own national market and we will not export it anymore, but to also build these kind of political pressures to renegotiate, I guess, the policies that go round the world. Any Singaporean? But yeah, thanks for the question. Sorry.
Maybe it's too early to ask this since the research is still ongoing, but I'm very curious to pick your brain on like the first intuitions that you have individually and as a collective on how artistic practice could enter this conversation and this material, and how it could somehow maybe contribute to complexify or to contribute to what and where and whom, to whom. Just picking your brain on that dimension.
Yoeri, you are the artist.
Well, I have something. Yeah, you can help with. Okay, so, but and then you can add as well your ideas, because actually, so it's the first time that I think we as a collective are physically meeting, and I think we will, talk about these ideas and how to make this and artistic practices in terms of changing perspectives when the corporate world and also the NGO world is very focused on efficiency and on simplification and efficiency rather than, for example, care and other notions. I think this is what artistic practices can bring in a lot. And I'm dreaming of hacking the RSPO roundtable, so this roundtable for sustainable palm oil production, which really exists and it has a lot of money. And they do have bioeconomy summits. I think the last ones were only online due to the pandemic. And there are also alternative bioeconomy summits. So bioeconomy just means that we shift away from fossil fuels and we use more biological ingredients to fuel the same economy and keep it growing. So there's even more pressure on land. And yeah, I would like to hack with artistic formats these kind of summits where all the different stakeholders meet, but also to give more voice to the groups that already intensively work on from social justice perspective and indigenous perspectives, I think, too. And maybe you have more.
Yeah, maybe also because it's such an impossible articulation that, kind of poetry can come in to communicate things or to and I also think, artists can be very, they can be very radical. They can propose a very radical proposition, and I think that's another. But I think that question is also related to us, like how do we as a group maybe work with this and I think you already have been doing that, and for many years.
Maybe you can specify for you in relation to your own practice as an artist and a farmer. What
Yeah.
are the specific elements within this complex, vast case study that resonate with you in a way that you might not be able to still fully flesh out into something more concrete? But what are the first intuitions?
Yeah, for me, I got really interested in trying to see how the kind of Dutch history could be re-implied to make them complicit to this kind of overexpanding economy. So not sure that is only artistically, but one of the reasons why I really wanted to work with the archive in Bogor in the Botanical Garden was to also kind of work with the visual material and the fact that the archive is in Dutch and it contains 400 years of botanical history. Yeah, it's so absent sometimes in the discourse and how. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of, in some way, maybe in an artistic way, to hold them accountable for this, and also maybe the solution should then also be more on the agenda, and how Rotterdam as an industrial city is implied in this too, and it's also absent, it's so invisible. And yeah, also Unilever, like now is their time that they really try to greenwash themselves, and of course they do. They're maybe the least worst of all the company at the moment, because they also have the budget to do that, and they go a bit more into taking in consideration other strategies, and now they have been punished by the stock market, for example. And but yeah, so for me it was also interesting to trace these companies. Like Shell came forth out of Unilever. It was on the rubber plantation that somebody from oil, and then Shell was born. And so all of this is actually kind of weaved into the Dutch wealth, and I think that yeah, maybe to make that connection was somewhere where I saw myself as an artist.
I think maybe just to add on a small point, I think for me, I felt a lot of the business pressure having worked in Singapore as well, and I felt like it was really hard territory to kind of where certain narratives were being perpetuated, and it's very obvious that the arts, or just generally speaking, the imagination is a very powerful, it really invites a lot of possibilities to speak other imaginations and narratives, and to really exercise other ways of speaking, especially in business environments where, there are all these like sustainability indicators. Like, do we need indicators? Are there other ways to measure, or do we need to measure what is growth? So to exercise different ways of speaking terminologies before we bring them into the real world, or what Sina was sharing about world building, not just in this society, but also other societies where different narratives were perpetuated by governments. Like my government also speaks of economic progress, but it bases it on the, honestly speaking, other countries around us, and colonial trajectories that still continue till today. And I think a lot of the people who grew up alongside me also kind of only were told certain narratives, but maybe it's time for us to rethink these narratives and how it came to be before we start to let them unravel and then bring forth other narratives that can coexist alongside these narratives as well. So I think that's, broadly speaking, what the arts can really bring a lot of real possibilities into existence as well. Yeah.
Can I told you on the open studio? Like, yes.
Thank you. If Marika or Jim have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and talk to us. Otherwise, if I have a question. Marika, feel free.
Hi.
Hey.
So I'm not sure how many students we have left from Helsinki here, but maybe they would be different than to be there, to be here. But I was thinking of if they would be interested in hearing, in a way, how do you see, I don't know whoever can answer to this, but how you feel the residency itself when you get away from the place where you normally are, and when you come there and when you meet each others or other people or the new society surrounding. I myself, I have done residencies a couple of times in my life, and I think I get some kind of new view of my own artistic practice or researchal practice too. So did you find this effective way to work with these things? Did you nourish each other's like plants? like, like the whole idea of being in kind of, society where we are all together. So I kind of started to think of all of your areas. How did they change?
I'm the resident of the Jan van Eyck, yeah. So maybe I can just shortly share my experience in Jan van Eyck. Yeah, yes, of course, I've been done several residency, but mostly in a short periods, like 1 month to 3 months, and then to having for almost a year or a year in this program. It's also giving a lot of time to think. Also to, let's say, if I'm not doing this residency, maybe my interest or how I see the situation of the, in this case, about the palm oil, maybe it's not that enriched. Like I learned it from also from Yoeri, from Sina and Michel, and any other person that I meet. And yeah, I think to having 1 year is a little bit also feels like temporarily, because for me it's good to giving you like, kind of way of seeing or thinking, but to produce something, I feel it's not really grounded yet in here, because it's I mean, we will we knows that in some months it will be end, and then and so on. So that was what I'm thinking. So in between, like temporarily, but also you have like a quite long time to meet, to build the networking, to learn from each other. So yeah, it's good. Sadly, it's only 11 months. Maybe 12 months will be better.
This is the right moment to.
Helsinki can help us. But maybe we can talk. We switch immediately into the talk about the residency program. But yeah, but then everything. I mean, time is always temporarily, right? There's always a temporality to anything, I suppose. My question would be, can you take that temporality with you? And yeah, in the sense of, because if it would have been 3 months, you would have sort of, yeah, defined yourself in relation to that, right?
Yeah.
And if it's 6, and obviously also the topics that you're researching are all of topics that need long research, right? That need time. And maybe that time is sort of distributed amongst yourself, because also the topics that you are investigating also are close to each other, you know? So maybe, I don't know, trying to find solutions here. And another one more thing. Also relating to Bruno's question. I mean, is there a need for output? I mean, why would we question what kind of output is needed when it comes to this kind of research, right? Because if it would have been a different topic and you're working with archives and you're working with material, you would have presented that as well, right? You would have presented maybe the history or parts of this history. You would have presented a couple of questions, and it would have been sort of research-based, or it would at least have touched the public in some sort of way, right? And translate in the subjects that you are investigating. So whether art can do anything, you know, is maybe we should start with the question whether we're not bound to output. We're not bound. We are bound to the research that we do. We are bound to the communications that we have with the public. Maybe it's in there, and that is a different kind of communications than maybe academic research. So I don't think we need to do anything in that sense. You know, this is it. This is what we do. This is artistic practice.
Yes.
But don't that make sense?
My question was not also in relation to output necessarily.
Yeah.
It was in relation to how the artistic practice could be interweaved with with this research, not necessarily output. But one could argue that this is also some sort of output.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Yoeri, Sina, Elia, Michelle. Looking forward to seeing the next steps of this research and the many outputs that will come out of it. Thank you also to Marika and Jim for being online. And see you next time.
And the dinner.